Hello, I'm Sue Day, Director of Women's Football at the FA.
And I'm Belinda Moore, Head of Women's Rugby at the WRU. We've just had a fantastic session talking about the blueprint for growth in the women's game.
And we're at Leaders Week. We hope you enjoy the session.
Right, so we're going to spend the next 30 minutes talking women's sport. I don't think we could start, Sue, without talking about last weekend at Twickenham. You were hugely instrumental in getting the Rugby World Cup to England, and a former Red Rose. How special was Saturday?
Yeah, it's very, very hard to put into words. For those people who don't know, I am Director of Women's Football at the FA now. I previously had a similar role at the RFU, England Rugby, and used to play quite a long time ago now as a Red Rose. So it's really hard to put into words how special Saturday felt. As a former player, it was just mind-blowing. So there's an old Red Roses WhatsApp group, so nearly all 267 women who played for the Red Roses are on this WhatsApp group, and it lost its collective mind for 6 weeks, but then culminating in the fact everyone's ill now. They've all gone, because everyone's been socialising and celebrating, and just, you know, when I started playing, there were about 200-300 people came to matches. A few years later, you know, gradually growing and growing, and then for there to be 82,000 was genuinely mind-blowing. And as a former leader in rugby, it was one of the proudest moments of my entire life, actually. And I mean proud in terms of proud of the sport, proud of World Rugby, proud of England Rugby, proud of the team behind the teams who put so much work in to get there. We set a target back in 2020 when an average attendance for an England women's match was about 5,000. We set a target to fill Twickenham. And, you know, and everybody said, you're absolutely crazy, what you're talking about. But the work that so many people have put in to build to that moment is phenomenal. So I felt very, very proud. And it really matters, right? Moments like that where stadiums are full and seeing women run around, be powerful and strong, it really matters because it generally changes the way people think about what women and girls can be. And it changes how everybody perceives women and girls. Little boys running around with Sarah Byrne tops and Meg Jones tops, and by the way, Chloe Kelly tops and Leslie Russo tops. It really matters because those kids grow up just seeing sports people and just seeing sport and believing in women's sport. It was amazing.
And Britt, you were there as a spectator, as was I. What were your observations of the day?
Yeah, it was absolutely amazing. The fans, the atmosphere in the stadium, the result, just everything about it was just incredible, and it was just a really great day for women's sport overall. So I just felt really fortunate that I got to be there and witness history.
And you touched on this just now, Sue. I mean, it was interesting. World Rugby released their blueprint for growth during the Rugby World Cup, and they talked about 49% of fans have become fans in the last couple of years, and a further 31% of women's rugby fans were motivated by major international tournaments. With both your football and your rugby head on, how do those major events like the Euros, the Rugby World Cup, help supercharge the women's game?
Yeah, the major events probably matter even more in women's sport than in men's sport because there's, I guess you'd call it an awareness gap. So every little boy grows up knowing that there's a space for him in sport because society tells him that. Every man knows that there's a space for him as a fan or as a coach or as a referee or whatever it might be. But we haven't been giving women and girls those messages. And we have to work out how we cut through that and get through to women and girls and help them understand that there is a place for them in sport. And major events are the biggest tool that we have to do that because they put the sport on the biggest stage possible. And people watched on Saturday who would, in a million years, never have watched before. And they saw, first of all, brilliant sport, right? And so that just tells you that there is this amazing product, fans, to come along and watch and keep coming and come more habitually and bluntly spend your money on tickets and subscriptions and all of that. It tells girls that there is this amazing sport that you can play, this amazing sport you can be a coach in, whatever it might be. And so because we are coming from such a small base in women's sport, and we have got decades and decades of social conditioning to fight against, the major events make such a big difference because they are the simplest way we can get real cut through and get people excited. A lot of people have asked me in the last few days, oh my word, that tournament must have completely blown your expectations out the water. And my honest answer is no, it didn't. It did not blow my expectations out the water, because we know how amazing women's sport is. We know that given the right attention and resources and all of that, what amazing events women's sport people can put on. We know that it deserves to have millions of people watching on the telly and hundreds of thousands of people buying tickets. So we knew all of that. So it didn't blow my expectations away. What the bit that probably did surpass my expectations was how brilliantly the organisers of the tournament really tapped into what makes women's sport special. And I think we'll probably talk about that a bit more, because what is women's sport, what makes it a bit special, is going to be part of what we can grab hold of to help grow it.
And Britt, obviously you sit brand side. PepsiCo have an impressive women's sport portfolio. Can you share a little bit more about that portfolio and how the organisation got into women's sport? How easy an ask was that at the boardroom level?
Yeah, so I think for us it all started with sport originally. And as a company and as people in this room, we know that nothing brings people together like the power of sport. It has this amazing ability to unite communities and also give you a way to connect with consumers because it's about a passion point. So for us at PepsiCo, we have massive consumer brands that are iconic, like Pepsi, Lay's, and Gatorade. So as we start to look at our portfolio, we want to make sure that we are partnering with both men's and women's sports, because it allows us to connect with those consumers in a way that we're not able to by ourselves. But we do have a trailblazer in our portfolio with Gatorade. Gatorade has been involved in women's sport for a really long time. They partnered with the WNBA from day one. So that's 29 years and counting that they've been a partner of the WNBA. And speaking from someone that grew up in Chicago in the 90s, I distinctly and vividly remember commercials with Michael Jordan and Mia Hamm together with Gatorade, and the impact that made on me as a young girl. And they're still doing it today with the likes of Caitlin Clark and Sophia Smith and other athletes that they have on their roster. So for a brand like Gatorade, it has been part of their DNA that you connect with consumers through sport, and you do so across men's and women's properties. Some of our other global brands like Pepsi and Lay's, we identified a major opportunity with women's football. We became the first men's Champions League partner to also become partners with the Women's Champions League in 2019. And our portfolio has grown since then. So yeah, we have UEFA Women's Champions League, Women's Euro, FIFA Women's World Cup, and F1 Academy at the global level. But we also have our local partnerships like the WNBA in the US as well. And I think for me, the most exciting piece is as our portfolio is growing, we're just getting more and more case studies, touch points to prove that women's sport isn't just a purpose play for our organization. It's a true catalyst for growth for our business and our brands.
And talking of that growth, I mean, it's brilliant to hear a brand that's so invested in women's sport. So as a rights holder, what do you think we can do to bring more brands to the table? How do we help them to see that potential that's on offer, post this World Cup, post the Euros? How do we tap into that?
Yeah, there's a few things in that for me. If we're going to be talking to brands, we need to understand ourselves, what it is that we've got to offer. And I still think, we talked about here this weekend and looking at the Women's Euros just a few weeks ago, there is a special, slightly different feel to women's sport and women's football and women's rugby. But I'm not sure that we can fully define that yet. And so we have to be able to, really be able to explain what it is. What is this thing that is different and special. Actually, part of the women's strategy at the FA at the moment, we have a project which is define and protect the uniqueness of the women's game. So first of all, we have to define it. And when so we've got to be really intentional about understanding ourselves, what is this special thing that we've got, and being able to articulate it so that we can articulate it to brands. Secondly, I think we need to be able then to, bluntly, resource ourselves up enough so we can have those conversations. So often, with rights holders, we used to have some men's rights, now we've got some women's rights, but we're asking the same teams to do twice as much with the same results. Often happens through, putting on events as well, events teams. Suddenly they've got double the amount of events, but the team's the same size. And so, we've got to take responsibility and really resource ourselves up to be able to, create the right stories and then go out there and tell them. Lastly, I think, there's something about making sure we are all valuing women's sport in the right way too. Again, we've all grown up in men's sport. We all think about value in terms of men's sport, in terms of eyeballs, whatever it might be. Is there a slightly different way of thinking about it? Women make far more of the spending decisions. Do we need, actually, is the value of an eyeball in women's sport a higher value than an eyeball in men's sport because you've got more people who are making spending? So we've got to really think hard about how we value sports as well and have that conversation with brands too. So for me, it's just being really, really intentional, really understanding what is it that makes women's sport, really understanding how we can value it and having those conversations with brands and all of us going on the journey together, because the rights holders definitely haven't got all the answers.
And actually, one of the things you raise there is it often comes up for one of the challenges for women's sport is about being measured by those same metrics as men's sport, particularly, say, broadcast ROI. Britt, how do you evaluate, as an organisation, the impact of your women's sports sponsorships? How do you stack that up so you can go up to your board and say, this is why it's valuable?
Yeah, at PepsiCo, we look at our sponsorships the same, actually, across men's and women's, and it's across the 3 Rs, which are reach, resonance, and ROI. It's probably not surprising that a lot of our women's partnerships do really, really well when it comes to resonance, things like purchase intent, consideration, a brand for me, things like that. But we've also seen that they're performing really well in terms of ROI because they really can drive growth for our business and our brands. We feel so strongly about that. We actually partnered with Nielsen Sport this year and created a white paper called Undervalued to Unstoppable, the unstoppable rise of women's sport. And in that, we see that women's football in particular is going to be a top 5 sport by 2030, which that is a massive scale audience. And by the way, it's predominantly a female audience. As Sue mentioned, women make 75% of the purchasing decisions in the household. So suddenly, this becomes a mass reach opportunity with a high value audience that then allows us to go into the business and explain that this is a good business decision for our business and our brands, and it's probably a good business decision for the other brands in the room as well.
That's a good thing to hear. And so you talked a little bit about resourcing up. We all looked to the FA after the success of the Lionesses. What can we learn from that success that we can apply to other sports? Because the FA were kind of the trailblazers, if you like, with that success. What lessons are there for the other rights holders to be learned from that success? Yeah,
I think there's masses of success to Lionesses. The Red Roses now as well are going to get loads of attention. What I would say is there is still loads of work to do in football. So, rugby, cricket, all the other sports shouldn't just be copying football. We've got lots to learn too. We've all got to grab hold of this incredible moment of excitement in women's sport and turn it into genuine growth. And I mean growth in terms of pounds, first of all. Unashamedly, I'll talk about pounds first, because we need to generate the pounds to reinvest in all the other parts of it. But so we have to work really hard on everything that we've talked about today to generate value so we have got more money to invest. And then we have to invest it very, very wisely. We have to make sure we continue to focus on grassroots football and every other sport. And I think, for me, that is, when you're looking at the very long-term success of women's sport, that is so critical. Because if we get school sport right, every boy and girl grows up believing in the power of fandom, the power of playing, the power of coaching, the power of refereeing, and understanding that there is a place for them. And in 20 years' time, those kids are decision makers who just see men's and women's sport as equal. So grassroots, absolutely. Sustaining success at the very top end, much, much harder than getting success in the first place. So working out how you stay ahead, being really intentional about understanding new technologies, new approaches so you can stay ahead of the game. And then the bit that I keep talking about is the bit in the middle. So because women's sport has had to grow quickly, men's sport grew over decades, and well, actually hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And so it grew gradually from the bottom up. Women's sport, we've had to accelerate, and you have to start somewhere. And so we've started with grassroots, and we started with the very top. And because we know we need that shot window, we now have to work really, really hard to fill the bit in the middle, make sure there are the right pathways from grassroots up to the top of the game, make sure there is the right pyramid system of leagues and so on. And that's the far less exciting, less sexy bit that can get easily forgotten. But otherwise, we end up with a bit of a house on stilts. You've got this beautifully built bit at the top, some really good foundations at grassroots, but a bit rickety in the middle. And so I would say there, we all have to focus our attention in the dark, doing the hard work.
And Britt, you must get lots of proposals from rights holders, from all sorts of organisations coming across your desk. How do we make ourselves as rights holders more attractive to brands? You know, what would grab your attention? What is it your business is looking for in a proposal?
Yeah, I think for us, it's about keeping the fan at the heart of what we're doing. And, you know, as many people in this room probably know, you know, there's a distinct women's sport fan. You hear a lot about it. They're a little bit younger, they're a little bit more family-oriented, and they're newer to the games, which I think is really important. So we really need to make sure that we're keeping that fan at the heart of what we're doing. And I actually think that that means that it's a really exciting time. It's a really exciting opportunity because it means that we can get really creative in how we bring brands to life with these properties in a way that it's impactful for the fan. So, I mean, if we get it right, then we have an equation for success because we have the fan is happy, the brand is happy, and the rights holder is happy. So suddenly that's an equation that's really, really positive for all businesses involved.
That sounds good. And we said we'd do some questions. I'll just take a couple of them quickly. I think the first one is to Sue. What is it that makes a women's sport, and specifically they've asked women's football, so special and different from men's football? What's that uniqueness around the women's game?
It's a very good question, isn't it? We're doing a whole project about the FA. A few things that I would pick out is that we have managed to create a sense of belonging and excitement. So obviously at the rugby this weekend, you know, you look out there and there is just such a diverse set of fans, people turning up who have never been to a match before, but no one's saying, oh, you know, you can't come in, who are you? You don't understand. It's just welcoming, letting anybody in. My best mate, who is a rugby fan through and through, spent quite a lot of money going to the Euros final on her own because she thought, I'm not missing this. She bought a ticket, got a plane ticket, probably spent about $1,000, all of it all in, but she just wanted to go and be part of that special moment, and she could just turn up, and she was welcomed. She'd made hundreds of new friends by the end of the day, by the end of that amazing special day. And I think that is part of it. It is young and accepting and exciting, and I do think, talking the brand conversation, what a beautiful thing to be connected with.
Yeah, just to build on that, that's what makes us excited as well, is that when you look at our portfolio, it's an opportunity that is similar to what we have, but it's also unique. Yeah. So it's complementary, but incremental. And all of those things that you were talking about with, you know, the values that it stands for are also values that are important to brands. So I think it really is an exciting time and an exciting opportunity.
And someone's asked what comes next for the next 5 years for women's sport, and somebody's also asked about the next big sporting moment. We obviously got the T20 Cricket World Cup next year, but what do you hope for the next 5 years of women's sport? I'll go to you first, Britt.
Yeah, I think for me, and I've been hearing this phrase a lot, but I think it's poignant in that it's it's a movement, it's not a moment. And I think over the next 5 years, it's really solidifying that, is having the calendars of exciting events that are coming up, but also making sure that the ongoing seasons are supported in a way that's beneficial as well. So yeah, I think that would be it for me.
And I'd add to that we continue to listen to women and girls and male and female fans of women's sport, and make sure we are giving them what they want, and it remains special and different. And a big part of that is that we continue to put athletes at the heart of it, and we help athletes be who they are in the middle of it. Because I think we all know that the research says that in women's sport there is a greater followership of athletes often than teams. And we've seen both the Lionesses and the Red Roses and loads of other women's sports people as well. When you give them space to show who they are, their personalities shine through, and everybody wants to join in with them. So a big hope for me is that we can, as it gets bigger and bigger, and as the pressure gets greater and greater, that we can keep hold of that, because that's another thing that's so special.
And that's a really good point, actually, Britt. Obviously, you have ambassadors as a brand. How do those ambassadors and that the storytelling we get from women's athletes help to generate that growth that we're talking about in women's sport?
Yeah, I think that the fans tell us that they want more. They want to see the players. They want to know more about their personalities. They want to get more behind the scenes. And so we also know that when you look at the data, that people are more likely to follow the sport when they know more about the players involved. Yeah. So we as brands have a responsibility to support our talent, make sure that they have the platforms to be visible, but also to be authentic. Let them shine the way that they want to shine, and not maybe put so many restrictions on how they're showing up. So I think we as brands have an obligation to help support them and the growth because of that.
I guess a last question perhaps, which is looking sort of forward. It's an interesting question. How do we maintain this level of engagement and investment if we're not always world champions and European champions? Because, much as it's really nice to have both titles sitting in this country, that's not necessarily realistic at every tournament we ever go to. So how do we keep that investment and engagement going, even if we're not winning everything in sight?
Yeah, it's the boring stuff, isn't it? It's really easy to have great visions and great moments, but it's the boring stuff in the background. So it's having a long-term sustainable plan for the growth of women's sport that talks about the commercials, but it talks about grassroots, that looks at all those things in between that I talked about. So bluntly, it's having in the background the really, really boring plans that keep everybody honest. And that means then that you've got an engagement plan that keeps giving fans the content they need, that keeps engaging with brands in different ways. So it's the boring stuff, but that's the stuff that actually gets stuff done in the end.
And from a brand point of view?
Yeah, I think it's the consistency. I think it's making sure that you're showing up and you're showing up consistently for the future. For us, we are a big global multinational company, and we have key markets where we want to focus on women's sport, and that allows us to have that focus that is sustained over a long period of time so that we can ultimately grow it all together.
Well, I just want to say thank you both very, very much indeed. It's been fantastic talking to you. Please give it up for Sude and Britt Hadris.